Hey guys, are you ready for your second all grades special episode? I want to start by apologizing for, a little bit about how long the last episode was. I didn't realize I was going a little overboard and got so passionate about talking about coloring. I actually have a timer going, so we'll be able to tell, or I'm going to be able to keep track of just how long I'm going. And if I hit that, 10, 12, 15-minute mark, then I'll make sure I wrap it up so it's not a 35-minute video. So, again, apologies, just a little bit though, because it's kind of fun to be able to talk about something that you really like. So, speaking of things that I really like, we're going to be doing another thing that's really close to my heart today. We're going to be doing things about lines, and as some of you may have realized from the picture that was up at the beginning, it's going to be kind of comic book based today. So, before we begin, you will need pencil and paper. Any kind of paper, lined paper is fine. Or printing paper, clearly a pencil and eraser, and you will probably want some sort of coloring supplies. I really should have made that one optional because I don't know if I'm going to require you to make this one today in color. Your learning targets today is that I can draw a variety of lines. I can draw a picture just using lines, and I can use techniques to create shading in my picture. So, one of the things about today is that everybody is doing this. Just like the coloring one, everybody in all of the grade levels are learning and going to be using lines with their project. So that's why this is just going to be one big episode for everybody, because everyone's going to focus on the same kind of thing. Am I going to ask my kindergartners to draw the same thing as fifth graders? No. But you still need to know these lines. You still need to be able to recognize them. And we've already been over lines quite a few times with my classes, so this really shouldn't be a big surprise for most of my kids. So, first we're going to learn about our artist. This is Jim Lee. He is a comic book artist who is still in the comic book industry today. He was born in Korea, but he grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. Now, I didn't realize that was a connection to Mary Englebright that we had last time. But yeah, so he also grew up in St. Louis like she did. He would grow, when he was a kid, he drew posters for his school's plays, and that helped him get into art. But he did not study it. He took, in college, he actually earned a psychology degree. And after he graduated, he gave himself a year to get into the comic book industry before he would start going to medical school if he didn't. And he submitted his artwork to many companies and was turned down before he finally made a break with the Marvel Comics studio and the X-Men in particular. He ran his own comic book studio called Wildstorm in the 90s, but he eventually sold it so he can go back to focusing on actually doing comic books. He is now currently the CCO, Chief Creative Officer of DC Comics. And there's the link to his Wikipedia article in case you were interested. Now, I'm going to show you some of his artwork. We're going to look at some things, and I'm going to talk to you about how comic book art gets made. So this is some of his early work. This is the X-Men. This is a special one to me in particular because I still have this issue. This was one of the first things I bought when I was a kid. He has so much action going on in these comic books. There's so many lines. Look, there's even lines that aren't affected, that aren't on people, but they're in the background. They make the action look like it's really happening. But let's look at some sketches. Comic books and people are usually heavily drawn with just line. Color can really be kind of an afterthought. Look at the Flash. He doesn't have color on him in these pictures, but you can still tell that he's got muscles because of the shadows. You can still tell that he's going really fast because of those action lines all around him. You can still see where his costume is. You can see where his logo is. And those are all just basic line drawings. So this is going to kind of be a way that you can practice just black and white art too, if you want. But again, I am not expecting this quality of black and white from you. I'm just showing you an example of how the black and white art can look. So this is what happens when you're making comic books. First, you start with a sketch. Now, the sketch on the left is not actually a Jim Lee picture. It's another artist who drew his based on Jim Lee's. And Jim Lee's picture is the one on the right that is fully colored. If you can look in closely, you can still see that there are lots of little lines that help make the shadows in parts of Captain America's shield, and costume, and other parts. But when a comic book is being made, first it starts off by just being drawn. Then someone inks it, which is they take an ink pen or an ink marker, or really nowadays mostly computers, and they take the boldest lines and the most important parts and they highlight them. And then someone gets rid of the eraser markings, and then color is added. This is the same process that's done with a cover. So both of these are Jim Lee's pictures. So you can see the beginning, the sketches on the left where it's just lines. No color, just lines. And then on the right you can see where someone has added the color and made it a more, visually popping kind of comic book. So, let me get to my camera. I'm going to tell you something. I used to work in a comic book store before I was a teacher. I was 6 years at Titans Comics, and I've learned a lot about drawing comic books because that's what I draw. So that's why this is something that's kind of important to me, and I really wanted to bring that up to you guys and show you how line art is really important. Look at cartoons. Look at comic books. Things like that, they really rely on line and then color. So that's why we're going to look at this, and we're going to practice some line examples, and we're going to practice some line shading techniques, and then you can add color to something. So let's talk about the kinds of lines. There are actual lines versus implied lines. An actual line is something that's actually in the picture. That curvy line on the left is actually in it. There's no denying it. There's nothing else there, just that curved line. On the right side, it's an implied line. It only looks like it's in that picture. It's the same shape, but all of those other little lines stop where the other line was and make it look like there's a line. But there is no actual line in this picture. This is another example of it. This white line or white path going up does not actually have any lines at the edges. All of these lines are going up to one spot and they're stopping. So that's another example of implied lines. Now, geometric versus organic. I have examples here that are shapes, but it's the same for lines, so I've kind of done both lines and shapes. Lines and shapes that are regular, easily measured, and in their appearance are called geometric lines. These are things like squares, circles, triangles, evenly made stars. Even this kind of flower one on the side is still geometric because it's really just 4 circles put together. They are not normally appearing in nature. Not normally. Now, there are some exceptions, so I don't want anybody right now to go, what about snowflakes? What about flowers? What about... Yes, I know there's some of them that are close. But for the most part, geometric things are things that humans have made. Organic lines and shapes are very irregular and are not easily measured. So there are also things that appear readily in nature. They appear pretty commonly. Like an apple is not going to be a perfectly round circle with a little stem at the top. It's usually, a real apple has these little sides to them. It's got little bumps at the bottom. This heart is not perfectly symmetrical on both sides. If it was perfectly symmetrical on both sides, it would actually be geometric. This leaf is all nice and curvy. Here's a blob. That's definitely organic. So those are the kinds of lines, the 4 different kinds that you'll use. And before we go any further, let's look at the types of shading that we have. Now I'm going to show you these, and then I'll show you how to actually do them. So the top one is called hatching, and that's just drawing some little lines going across. Underneath it is called cross hatching. Then there's blending, and then there's stippling. So let me pull up my document camera, and we will take a look at these. So, zoom down a little bit. Come on, camera. There we go. So let's talk about hatching. Not an egg hatching, but line hatching. This is when you just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 5, 5. You make lines that are kind of close to each other. Cross hatching is still hatching, just with lines going across it. So 1, da, 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 da. But then that can make things get a little bit darker. Stippling, and I apologize for all the parents out there who are about to hear thousands of little dots, is when you take your pencil or ink pen or whatever, and you start making little dots near each other, but like really close together so that they get darker, but then the farther away they get from each other, it makes it look lighter. So let's pull my little superhero guy that I was looking at, had up earlier, and let's look at some of these shading spots that we have. So on his arms and on the back of his hand, I used what? Hatching. That's right. It's just simple little lines that went one, no, like that. They don't look like they're very dark shadows. Up here next to his neck, I used what? Cross hatching. So when I was drawing them, I did something more like that. Also did that down there back behind his foot. And then on his finger, next to his hand, and near his bicep, I used the stippling one. That's a little bit harder, and it doesn't necessarily look as good on a person. This is usually for things like rocks or anything that needs to look like it's bumpy. Now, the last one that they had mentioned that I did not draw on here was called tonal. And that is when you use your pencil and you can do dark, or you can do light, or you can do very light, or you can even use your eraser and make it a little bit lighter. And we've practiced that with some of my classes. That was when we did the shading. You press down really hard, and then you don't press down as hard, and then you press down very lightly. And then for the last one, you didn't have to press down at all because that was the way that it went. So let's look at the projector. We've got some line drawing tips. Changing the pressure or pushing down will increase the way it looks. And this is the same tip that I gave you for coloring because it's the same kind of thing. If you press down really hard, you get dark color. If you press down really light or you press down gently, you get a light color. You can try outlining for a trick to make it shadows, or to make shading, and then try different techniques to use your shadows. I'm going to show you what I'm looking at. I'm going to show you what I'm going to work on in just a moment. That link at the bottom is just another great website that's got some line drawing techniques and exercises if you're very interested in it. And I am getting right on time. I'm going to be able to get this on time. I'm not going to be too far off. So let's look at your tasks. I want you to practice shading with lines like this. I want you to produce an image that you can practice shading with lines on. You could use a coloring page if you already have one, but you want one that doesn't already have shadows on it. or something like that. You can print one out from the internet if you can. You can try tracing one off the blank page, off the blank person template that I'm going to link on the next page. Before I go any further, if you trace off of your screen or your tablet or your monitor or whatever, do not press hard. Do not press hard. These things are not built for you to be pressing down on like it's a pencil. So if you do trace off of a monitor or a tablet or whatever, do gently, gently. The connection is that I want you to practice shading and using lines for your expedition piece. This is a great way to practice, much like the coloring. Oops, but I even put coloring in there. On something that is fun to you with no pressure. This is just going to be something fun for you to practice. Practice a few times before we start working on our expedition pieces too. And the reflection. At the bottom of your paper, write your name. Tell me something in a short sentence that you learned from this week's lessons. Now, let's take a look at the picture I drew. So I had that picture earlier up about the person running, and you know what? It made me think of one of my old favorite characters, Sailor Moon. So I decided that I would draw Sailor Moon, and we're going to practice real quick. You guys can watch as I'm going to put some lines, and I'm going to make her look a little bit more 3D. So I'm going to show you, I'm just going to show you the kind of thing that I'm talking about. Now, you know what? I want to pause. You don't have to draw yourself. You don't have to draw a person. You don't have to draw a superhero. If you want to draw a car and do shadows on it, go for it. If you want to draw the Nintendo Switch and put some shadows and things on it, that's fine. I'm sticking with superheroes and people because that's kind of the thing that goes with what I was working on earlier. So you do what you need to practice these. So let's go back to looking at Sailor Moon. I'm going to add, see, I had some shadows along there. I'm also going to add some shadows next to the bottom of her hand because that's going to make it look a little bit darker. She had them coming off or be on the back of that hand. Now, there'll be a little bit down on that side. We'll add some on the same side over there because if it's next to the bottom of that arm, it would be over here next to the bottom of this arm, which means the same thing on that side. And so far, these aren't dark places yet. I am going to, though, make the shadow under her neck darker, and I'm going to do that by doing the cross hatching. So I made that a little bit darker. I would also need to make, and see how I'm turning the page? Your artwork, your paper doesn't have to stay flat on your table. I'm also going to go ahead and make the back of her collar area a little bit darker because it's kind of behind her head. This bottom part of her bow would be darker. I'm going to add a detail right there and make it. What I want you to look at for shadows and adding these is that I just want you to come up with a way to make some more depth to your picture, but not having to rely on color just necessarily. This is just a good way to practice shadows. I'm going to add some up here. Now this is the kind of spot where I could do some stippling because that doesn't need to look quite as smooth. So what I'm doing is I'm going to dot, 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 and I'm going to make these dots near her head really dark. Ooh. But then the farther out it goes, I'll spread them out a little bit. And it still makes some shadow. Oops. It still has some shadow, but it's not quite as dark in these spots. You pick what you're going to do. I'm not going to do the whole picture because now I am starting to hit the 20-minute mark, and I don't want this thing to last another 30 minutes like the last one. So let's go back to your tasks. So I want you to work on something that you can do to practice line on. Again, I've got a person on the next sheet if you want to look at it. You don't have to use it. It is entirely up to you. But here's the blank person template. There's the website too if you want. This will also be on the daily sheet, so you can look at that. So practice something. You can make this look like you can make it look like your mom, your dad, your grandma. You can make it look like a new superhero. You can make it look like a current superhero. Whatever you want to choose. But I want to see you practice the shadows, or those lines too. Alright, so if you have any questions, you can email me at afrans@amanaacademy.org. Turn it in to your grade level folder. This is the day that I want you to turn in some things to me. I'd love to see your coloring pictures too, so if you want to send those to me, that would be great, but I want to see your shadows and your line drawings. So turn them into your daily sheet. That will be your turn-in folder, which will be on your daily sheet. So let me see, what am I at? I hit 20 minutes. 15 minutes shorter than the last one and 5 minutes over what I said I'd do. Sorry. So anyway, have fun. I will see you guys next week. We'll be doing individual classes next time. So see y'all later.